and welcome to the Baywatching 100th episode special. Yes, after 4 years, we have at last reached this momentous occasion, and oh, the things we've been through together. It was difficult for me to decide what exactly to do for this unique video, so I took to Twitter and Patreon to ask you folks what you wanted. And overwhelmingly, you asked for more trivia, and hey, that I can definitely and gladly provide. Looking up behind-the-scenes info on Baywatch has racked up so many extra odds and ends over the years that I couldn't possibly have fitted all into the show, so yeah, I can tell you some stories. One thing I want to point out before we get started, and a general rule of mine for Baywatching, is this. Unless it's relevant to the show or just kinda interesting or funny, I don't like to go too deep into the actors' personal lives. There can be quite a bit of nastiness sometimes, and I don't really feel like turning into a tabloid or exploiting misfortune. And while there's definitely some personal things in this video, I've only tried to include stuff that fits into my previously mentioned criteria. Hopefully I haven't crossed too many lines, but that's what I try to stick by anyway. Given that when I started this venture, I didn't know nearly as much as I do now, here I'll be covering various bits of trivia from the first 5 seasons that I either missed or didn't know how to quite fit in. Everything after that we'll get to as we come to it. So let's take a time-traveling ride back to the 70s and cover the road so far. While in his 20s, Gregory Bonan was a young lifeguard with big ideas. After a long time of considering the possibilities of a lifeguard-themed TV show, he said quite poetically, "You know, if that piece of shit Chip show can be so popular, why can't we make a television show about lifeguards?" Some divine power seemed to agree, because after rescuing some children from a riptide, it turned out one of them was the son of TV executive Stu Irwin Jr., who worked for MTM Enterprises, a company owned by the future chairman and CEO of NBC. Wanting to repay the favor, Irwin helped him to develop this idea for 10 years. When Bonan's sister married TV writer Douglas Schwartz, Schwartz ended up helping him produce the show. Before we got to the series we all know and love, however, Bonan had quite a few ideas swirling around in his head, because really his only requirement was lifeguard. So we thought of a mini-series, a sitcom, and even a cartoon, which, I don't know, I want to step into that alternate dimension and see what that was like. But before they could do anything, they had to pitch it to NBC, and in order to sell it, they needed a proof of concept. So Bonan got his buddy and fellow lifeguard Michael Newman to star in a short video they shot on Memorial Day weekend all about a lifeguard's day. Essentially, it was just one of the montages you see in the show every week. In fact, it was edited into a montage or two in the pilot, and they reused the footage a lot. Newmy picking up this baby? That's from their pitch video. NBC liked what they saw, and the show premiered in 1989. Baywatch mainly filmed in Malibu, Venice Beach, Santa Monica Beach, and Temescal. There was a different beach in the first season, and apparently it was absolutely filthy, like covered in rocks and old needles and stuff. I mean, they had medics nearby because of this. It blows my mind they filmed there for an entire season. This wasn't the only danger the actors were put in, by the way, because they were filming the pilot in January, making the waters dangerously freezing, so much so that they had to finish filming in Hawaii, where they were shooting in shark-infested waters. At one point during the show, they were filming in nasty styrofoam-covered water, and there was a sewage spill John Allen Nelson had to outswim. And oh yeah, Alexandra Paul and Nicole Eggert once found a body with a gunshot wound. So that's terrifying! During production, they used 40 bottles of sunscreen per month, because while used needles were acceptable, skin cancer was not. Meanwhile, in Iceland, Baywatch was the only show ever to receive an influx of complaints about subtitles because they didn't like the text covering up the good stuff. Which brings me to the cast. Fun fact, Erika Eleniak's first film role was as the little girl Elliot kissed in E.T. Rewatch it, it's weird now that you know. The character of Jill was originally cast as Pamela Bowen, who in fact had started filming with them, but once she got to her first swimming scene, they discovered she had a debilitating fear of water. I guess she didn't think it'd come up in this lifeguard show. And before David Hasselhoff had the role, other actors considered to play Mitch Buchanan included Lorenzo Lamas and Adrian Paul. Other famous actors who auditioned for Baywatch included Dean Cain, who tried out for Matt Brody, Alicia Silverstone, Denise Richards, Paula Abdul, Sandra Bullock, Tia Carrere, who turned down the part after getting her role in Wayne's World, and Neve Campbell. In Neve Campbell's case, I've read 2 different reasons for her rejection, and both seem equally plausible. 1, she was too pale, and 2, her boobs were too small. It's hard to talk about Baywatch and not get into their treatment of women, and this is something that probably needs an entire video dedicated to it to really get into the nitty-gritty, but my short take on it is this. There was only one time I ever felt this show was offensively sexist. The rest of the time, it was a lot of dumb stories about pretty people on the beach. That isn't to say the show's image didn't affect the real world, but that's a whole other can of worms. While the stories were silly but generally not offensive, behind the scenes is a whole other deal. That includes a lot of stuff from producers and the casting department and such, and how vocal they were with the actresses about their image.
She gave a really good reading.
But she was not physically what we were looking for. I was probably really bitchy about it,
Vern
but
told
I'm sure
her.
I've told her. As Susie says, I've caused a lot of eating disorders
Yes.
in this town.
Baywatch had a clause in their contracts about how much weight the actors were allowed to gain during the show, and that included the men, but was definitely skewed more toward the women. And while I think that's probably a part of contracts in some other shows too, it seems like they were kind of bullies about it sometimes, especially with Yasmine Bleeth, who struggled with maintaining her weight.
Yasmine had gained some weight from the time we hired her. As the seasons went up, we even had a little poster on the craft service table. If you see this woman next to this table, please make sure you shun her away.
When Baywatch moved to syndication after the first season, the budget was slashed. So a lot of the sets were actually rooms they used off-screen, such as the lifeguard station kitchen and weight room. This also meant paying the actors the bare minimum they were required to, something which Michael Newman elaborated a bit on. He claimed he made more money renovating a house next door to him than he made in his entire run on Baywatch. Which is a shame, because Numi was their technical advisor and did a lot of dangerous stunts. He was a trained lifeguard and firefighter, so they would consult him on everything from rescue procedures, to what they said on the radio, to how to properly run with a rescue can. Not to mention the most vital part of the show, Hasselhoff's leg stand-in. I'm not kidding, they had him stand in because of Hasselhoff's chicken legs. And for all of this, he was paid $350 a day, comparing that to the height of Pamela Anderson's popularity, where she was making $60,000 to $80,000 an episode. But when she started, she was making what the other actresses were making, which was about $1,000. I've seen these numbers fluctuate depending on who's telling the story, and add to that the fact it's been 20 plus years, I'm just gonna say these are rough estimates. Numi's great, by the way. He seems super candid during interviews, and he always says some really interesting stuff. After Baywatch, he became one of Hollywood's leading water star trainers, which includes celebrities like Ashton Kutcher, Kevin Costner, and Tom Hanks. Despite being diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2011, he stayed active and kept such an amazing positive attitude. He's done charity work with Cedars-Sinai Regenerative Medicine Institute and continues to help people just like he did back then. He saved so many lives in his various jobs, so I consider him a hero. Speaking of which, he's not the only amazing human being on Baywatch. Gregory Alan Williams has such an incredible personal story. He's just a fascinating person. Before he was an actor, he was in the Marine Corps. He's also an author, and part of his life is chronicled in his book, A Gathering of Heroes, Reflections on Rage and Responsibility, a memoir of the Los Angeles riots. In April 1992, during the LA riots, he came across a crowd throwing bricks at Takao Harada in the middle of an intersection. Remembering back to his childhood when he was attacked for the color of his skin, he stepped into the crowd to rescue Harada. And by appealing to them to do the right thing, he managed to get the man out of there and ensure he was taken to the hospital. They were throwing bricks and beer bottles, and he still stepped in and saved that man's life. What a wonderful person. I hope we can all be as good someday. Another member of the Baywatch cast I have real respect for is Alexandra Paul, who seems like one of the most genuine and kind people. In fact, she's so likable, the producers specifically wrote the role of Stephanie in for her because she didn't fit any of the roles they were currently casting. She tried out for CJ and Summer. It also helped that she was super tall and would look good next to David Hasselhoff. In addition to being very nice, she's also an incredible athlete and really is a trained lifeguard. But don't confuse her niceness for being a pushover, because she's very outspoken and big into activism. She's been arrested at least 16 times during various protests covering everything from environmental issues, to peace, to gay rights, to animal rights. Other cast members big into activism are Yasmine Bleeth, who's helped raise money for breast cancer research as a spokesperson for Lead National Denim Day and other charities, an issue close to her since losing her mother to breast cancer when she was 20. David Charvet joined the Blue Seals in 2010, a nonprofit group focused on rapid response ocean preservation, and Pamela Anderson has been a big advocate for animal rights for years, focusing mainly on anti-fur campaigns. Speaking of animals, despite my many jokes about Mitch hating dogs, David Hasselhoff is a huge dog person. In fact, he has 5. I think he used to be big into dog rescues as well when he was married to Pamela Bach, but it could be he just takes a lot of pictures with dogs. Another fun fact, on May 18, 2017, David Hasselhoff was elected the first official mayor of Funner, California. So yes indeed, he is Mayor Hasselhoff. May his reign last forever. When he was asked to read for the part of Mitch, he played hard to get. He said he didn't want to wear a swimsuit to work, walked out, and then promptly told his manager to get him the job. Since then, he became very hands-on, resurrecting the show from cancellation using his own money and eventually becoming a producer. So yeah, he was pretty vocal about stuff behind the scenes. He was determined Baywatch would be a family show, so all of the Playboy stuff didn't sit so well with him. After Erica Eleniak did her Playboy shoot, NBC wanted her fired. But obviously, once Baywatch went to syndication, the show saw this as a great cross-promotion opportunity. Other cast members to do Playboy were Pamela Anderson, who has appeared on more Playboy covers than any other model, Gina Lee Nolan, Donna D'Errico, Tracy Bingham, Carmen Electra, Angelica Bridges, Marlise Andrada, Brandy Roderick, and Alicia Richter. And probably some more I don't even know about. If you don't recognize the names yet, you can probably predict the noticeable shift in later seasons. Hasselhoff was not into this at all. In fact, he didn't want Pamela Anderson to be involved with the series. He thought her image was bad for the show, describing it as icky and too rock and roll. He said her casting would alienate fans. Michael Burke and Douglas Schwartz had a different theory that he just didn't like the focus being taken away from him, but regardless, her casting did bring the show a lot of attention and helped shape the image they would eventually become known for. In 1995, Pamela Anderson would unintentionally give the show another boost. In February of that year, near the end of season 5, Pamela married rock star Tommy Lee after knowing him for 4 days. I don't want to get too deep into this, but it was rocky to say the least. Reportedly, he was very possessive and would start breaking things on set when she had to kiss other guys on the show, causing such a scene that security would make him leave. This was detailed in Hasselhoff's autobiography, Don't Hassle the Hoff. Well, in the same year, Anderson and Lee filmed a sex tape for their private collection. What followed was a very complicated plot involving a disgruntled employee and some genuine craziness. The newly married couple lived in a mansion and fired people quite often, and when one such person came to collect his tools and payment, Tommy Lee pointed a gun at him and demanded he left. So, in order to get revenge, he staked the place out for months and planned a heist. Knowing the layout of the house and where the security cameras were, he disguised himself as their dog by throwing a yak fur rug over himself and a U-Haul dolly. Along with some valuable items, he unexpectedly found himself in possession of the sex tape, which he planned to sell for big bucks. Because, coincidentally, this electrician also did some porn work on the side. So let me just state right here and now that what this guy did was really scummy, regardless of what happened to him previously. So I'm glad to say he didn't get rich off of this scheme. In fact, no one wanted to distribute it because they didn't have written permission from Pamela Anderson or Tommy Lee. And that included a member of the mob he went to. I don't know anything about this mob porn distribution business, but I guess anything goes. Eventually, the tape got sold via the black market internet, where people could pay for it by mail, and it got put on one of the few websites that could stream at the time. And since everyone had seen it by this point anyway, Anderson and Lee decided to sign it over to the streaming site. Ratings on Baywatch doubled after that, and that brings us to Season 6 and where we are now. There are many, many awesome things coming up, including the premiere of Baywatch Nights, so hold on to your butts, people. But for now, I found it nice to reflect back on these past 100 episodes. I highly recommend you check out the True Hollywood Story special on Baywatch if you can find it, because it contains a lot of this trivia and more with behind-the-scenes interviews and footage. I've certainly used quite a few of the clips by now, but the whole thing is endlessly engaging, and it goes straight until the end of the series, so there's plenty of info you didn't see here. As for what I covered today, the good and bad of it, I'm so grateful for Baywatch. They've provided me hours of entertainment and brought me together with such a wonderful group of fans. I want to thank them and thank you guys, because without you, I'd just be a silly girl who likes to watch a lot of TV. Thank you for sticking with me through 100 episodes, and I hope you stick around through the next 100. And believe me, Baywatch has 286 episodes, so we've at least got that much left. Thank you for your wonderful and sometimes hilarious comments, your support, and keeping Baywatch alive. Forever and always, you're always here. Next time on Baywatch, it's Baywatch's 100th episode! Again! Maybe! Can little Richard help Mitch save some street urchins with the help of Virgin Cola? We'll see!